Okay, so welcome very much, and it's good that we're beginning to get going now, getting ourselves into the swing. We know exactly the sort of things we should be doing on the chessboard. Now all we've got to do is learn more and more strategies. And today I would like to talk about this piece that we don't talk about so very often, and that's this one here, or this one here, the king. The king is our most important piece. If we lose our king, we lose the game. If our king gets attacked, we must find a way of getting him to a safe spot. We can do three things. We were talking about that last week with the checks and checkmates. If our king's attacked, we can try and take the piece that's attacking. We can try and block the piece that's attacking. Or we can try and move our king to a safe square. Those three things we must do, one of them at least, if our king's attacked. So if we're in check, we must get out of check. And the three ways to get out of check: take, block, or move. The best thing, of course, is to put your king in such a safe spot that he doesn't even get attacked. That would be the best thing to do. So we've been given a move, a special move, which allows us to do that, and that move is called castling. And that's a little bit about what I would like to talk about today. Kings suffer a little bit because at the start of the game they can only move one square. We want to attack the center of the board. That's this area here. You've already been told, okay, that pawns would like to move up to the center. Okay, that's fine. Pawns do want to move to the center. Kings, okay, suffer straight away because when a pawn moves to the center of the board, the king is a little bit more open. So black's pieces already are thinking, how can I attack this king? It's opened up. But you see, straight after that, we try and fill these gaps up by using our good pieces to move. We call it developing our pieces. So our knight might come. Look at the way it heads towards the center. Our bishop might come out next door to the center. But our king is still in the middle of the board. And if we want to push our other pawn up into the center, our king becomes even more wide open. So we're lucky in as much as we're given a special move which is called castling. Castling, you move your king 2 squares. Normally you would only be able to move it 1, but you move your king 2 squares and your rook jumps over the top of the king's position. So I'll just repeat that. Where your king starts, the king moves 2 squares and the rook jumps over the king's position. You can only castle when there's nothing between your king and your rook. So there's no swapping over anything else. Black can't all of a sudden swap the king and the rook in this position. Even if this knight was here, we can't jump our king over and jump our rook to there. That's not allowed. There has to be a clear space between our king and our rook. This bishop has to move. Now there's a gap between the king and the rook. Now we can castle. And when we castle, we always move 2 squares and our rook jumps over the top. Now, there are some times when you're not allowed to castle, and these are what I really want to talk about today. Then we're going to talk about a couple of castle type positions, some patterns that you might try and do in all of your games. And then I'm going to talk quickly at the end, hopefully if I've still got time, about trying to improve your ability to checkmate your opponent's king. Okay, and I'm going to talk about a little resource that we have online. So, to start with, let's have a look at a typical start of a game. Let's imagine that both sides push their pawns up into the center of the board. That's a great start. It's the start that most of the top players are using at the present moment, and it's a start that most experienced juniors are going to be using in their games. So, yep, castling is a move. I'm going to talk about it in a lot of detail in this session. So thanks very much, Lynn. Castling is a move, okay? And as I say, we're going to talk about it lots and lots in this session. Let's imagine I bring my knight out to here. My knight, on its very next go, would like to go here and take this pawn, which is a great move. So this knight can come and it can protect that pawn. The knights move around the corner in an L shape, both knights aiming at the pawn. This is a typical start to a game. White is planning 4 moves ahead in this game at the very start. Out comes the white bishop, and white wants to castle. He's cleared the space between his king and his rook, and on the next go, he can move his king 2 squares and jump the rook over. But black plays a little bit of a sneaky move. He brings his knight out, and his knight is aiming at taking this pawn. So white, who's looking at the game and looking at what his opponent's doing, which is what everybody should be doing in their games, decides it would be a great idea to protect his pawn with his pawn. So now if the knight takes, this pawn can take diagonal, and he'll win himself a knight. But black takes the chance to go check. The black bishop aiming straight at the white king, it's check. Remember, there are 3 ways to get out of check: take, block, or move. A lot of people think that castling is a move. Whoops, hold on, but we can't do it. The computer's not letting me do it. When we're in check, we're not allowed to castle. Okay? When we're in check, we're not allowed to castle. We've got to get out of check using one of the 3 ways that we know. Block. Okay, the bishop moves out the way. Now we can move our king 2 squares, and the rook will jump over the top and castle. So I'll just show you that again. We'll go back a couple of moves. Black moves his bishop to give check. White wants to castle, but they're not allowed, because when we're in check, we're not allowed to castle. We can take, block, or move, so a block would be a good move to do. The bishop moves out the way, and now we're not in check, we are allowed to castle. Okay? So that's the first rule about castling. If you're in check, you can't castle. Now I'm going to quickly show you a slightly different rule about castling. Castling is something that you should be doing in all of your games. Okay, or at least trying to do in all of your games. There's a different opening that looks a little bit like this. So let's imagine, oops, that we get to this position. There we go. And this knight's going to come to here. Good. And I'm going to get to this position. Now look, white wants to castle again. And, oops, it's not letting me castle again. This time, if I castle, I'm going to land in check. And remember, we're not allowed to be in check. So I've got to make sure that castling's a safe move. If I'm in check, I can't castle. If I'm going to land in check, I'm going to castle. So I can't castle to get out of check. I can't castle if I'm going to land in check. So they're the first 2 rules about castling. There are some other ones as well. I guess you've all met people who like to do this to start their game. So they push their pawn up the side of the board, and then they bring their rook up. And of course, because you're a good player and you know all about castling, you'll probably say, oh, you should be castling, not moving your rook up here. Look, I'm going to move my knight. Okay, I'll move my knight. I'm going to move my bishop. Oh, okay, I want to get my bishop out. Look, I'm going to castle. And white thinks that's a really great idea. I'll do the same thing. But the only thing is, of course, that if you've moved your rook, whoops, you're not allowed to castle. It's got to be the first move you do with your rook. So if you've moved your rook, you can't castle. Remember, if you're in check, you can't castle. If you're going to land in check, you can't castle. And if you've already moved your rook, you can't castle. Let's go back to this position. Remember that there are three ways to get out of check: take, block, and move. Imagine that white didn't block, but instead moved their king. Okay? They're not in check now. They're nice and safe. And black goes, I'm going to castle. And white thinks, wow, that's a really good idea. Oh, no, I can't do that. I want the rook to jump. I better go back to this square. I move my pawn up. And now I'm going to go back here. And now I'm going to castle. Huh? It's not letting me. That's because it has to be the first move you do with your king as well. If you've already moved your king, then you're not allowed to castle. So there are 4 rules about castling that you need to remember. Castling is a great move and one that you should do every game you play because it puts your king safe. You're not allowed to castle if you're in check. You have to take, block, or move to get out of check. You're not allowed to castle if you're going to end up in check because we're not allowed to be in check. You're not allowed to castle if your rook's already moved. And you're not allowed to castle if your king's already moved. So you've got to make sure you do it really quickly in your games. Now, this is the hardest one and the one that most people will forget. Okay, because it doesn't happen quite so often. The last rule about castling. Let's imagine that white does that and black does this. So we're going to go through our best opening again. White's going to go here and black's going to play a slightly different move this time. Black's going to play his pawn to here. Okay, so he's going to move his pawn down there and white's just going to go, I know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get my bishop out of the way. And black's going to go, I'm going to go here. Cool, I'll move my bishop out of the way because I don't want to get it taken. I'm going to move here and get my knight to attack the pawn. Alright, well I better protect the pawn. I'm going to go there, attack the knight, which is going to jump out of the way, and this bishop's going to come over here. And now white thinks, right, time to castle. I've already taken too long, so I'm going to castle. What's happening here? I'm not in check. I'm not going to land in check, but it's still not letting me castle. The reason is that the bishop is now aiming at the square next to the king. And when this square is attacked, we call it castling through check. And it's another rule about what we're not allowed to do. This one's the hardest one and the one that people forget if they're going to forget any. If the square next door to the king is attacked, then the king can't castle. It's called castling through check, and we're not allowed to do it. So there are a whole set of rules about casting and when we can't do it. Remember, if you're in check, you can't castle. There you go. In this position, you can't castle because you're in check. You have to take, block, or move. Also, if you're going to land in check, you're not allowed to castle because we're not allowed for our king to be in a place where it's attacked. If we have to travel through check, the king's going to go 1, 2 squares. When it lands on this square, on its way to castling, it's in danger. We're not allowed to do that. If we've already moved our king and it's gone backwards and forwards, we're not allowed to castle. It has to be the first move we do with our king. And also, it has to be the first move we do with our rook as well. In this position, the rook's moved up, it's come back. We can't castle. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're sitting there thinking, you're telling me to do all this great castling move, and it seems as if I can never do it. Well, actually, you can. It's really easy as long as you remember straight away to do it as soon as you possibly can. All the things I've told you just mean that the longer it takes you to castle, the more difficult it becomes, because your opponent's going to be checking you, is going to be trying to attack the square where you're going to end up. You might have to move your rook out the way to do some defense. So, castling should be done as quickly as possible. Look, let me show you a typical game. White's going to move his pawn to the center, and so is black. White's going to attack that pawn, in the centre, and black's going to protect it. White's going to move his bishop out, and black's going to come and attack this pawn. White's going to protect the pawn. Black's going to move their bishop, not to give check, but to go here. And now both sides are going to castle. So white is going to go 1-2 with their king, and the rook is going to jump over, and black's going to do exactly the same. Now let's just have a look at these 6 pieces on this side, this little pattern that we've got. This is called a classical castle position. Your king is here. It's sitting behind a barrier of pawns. These pawns are an effective barrier, a strong barrier to stop black's pieces from coming through. But you've got a little bit of extra help. You've got a rook that's guarding the back, and you've got a knight that's guarding the front. 2 good pieces helping your king stay safe, and 3 pawns. Now remember, when the king was in the middle of the board, we pushed our pawns in the middle to let our good pieces come out. That's cool. But here, he's now safely hidden away. Black's done exactly the same. And this is, in fact, if we just look at this position, we'll just look at these pieces here, okay? Just the green ones up the top. These is called a classical castle position, and it's the one that happens most in a game of chess. You guys, all of you, should be thinking about how you can use this in your games. As you get better, you also start to think, how can you start attacking that position? But it's pretty difficult. You've got to like break through a solid barrier that's guarded by 2 great pieces. Actually, even the king's doing some protecting as well. And even if you do get a good attack happening, black's got all these pieces that can run over and help defend anyway. Now, there is another time when you can castle. Oops. There is one other thing that I want to show you about castling. So we're going to look at this position, which is a new position. In this position, which we've sort of seen before, it's white's move. White's played 1, 2, 3 moves. Okay? And black's played 1, 2, 3 moves. So it's white to play. Think to yourself, is white's king attacked? Is white, if they castle, going to be moving into danger? Will the white king have to travel through a check? Or is this square safe? Has the king moved yet? Or has the rook moved yet? Well, in that case, we can castle. And we castle by moving our king 2 squares, and our rook jumps over the top. It's taken white just 4 moves to do this. 1, 2, 3, and on his 4th move he's castled. Remember, castling is a special move. You can only do it once in a game. And also, if you have castled, you can't uncastle. You can't all of a sudden go, no, I don't want to do that, in a few moves later, and then bring your king back over the top. You've castled to put your king in a safe place. And king safety is one of the most important things in a game of chess. I want to show you a different position. In this one, black's already castled. Black's looking really, really good. Black's king is safe. This is our classical castle position. This rook is guarding the back, the barrier of pawns at the front, and the knight is protecting. Actually, he's got some extra pieces on that side. Look at these 2. They're also doing a sort of defense job. They're also doing a bit of an attack job as well. White is thinking to himself, if I castle and move my king over here, that's where all black's pieces are. My king's not probably going to be safe there because black's pieces are all ready to attack me. Well, in chess, you're allowed to castle in both directions. So you could castle like this, with your king ending up on that square, or you could castle in the opposite direction. Whichever way you castle, your king always moves 2 squares. and your rook jumps over the top of the king. So the king goes 1, 2, but this time the rook jumps a little bit further. On this side of the board, which we call queen side castling, because we've had to go straight across where the queen is, you're still protected by 3 pawns. You still have a barrier. Your king's a little bit further from the edge, so it's a little bit less safe, it's a little bit riskier. However, you've still got your rook that's protecting the back, and you still have your knight that's protecting the front. So it's not that much riskier. So when you're playing your games, if your opponent's beginning to bring all of their pieces out ready to see you castle, you could always sneak your king off in the opposite direction. And now all of black's pieces, which are aiming down over this side of the board, are thinking, oh, that's no good because the king's over here. Now I'm going to have to shuffle all the way back over here. So castling is something that we should do every game, but we should be also thinking about how our king can get safe. Okay? Let me just remind you once more of when you're not allowed to castle. You're not allowed to castle if your king is in check. So let me see. In this position, the king's in check. If you're in check, you can't castle. You have to take, block, or move. You are allowed to castle after a check, but not when you're in check. You're also not allowed to castle if you're going to land in check. So if the king moves 2 squares, it's going to land in a check, and we're not allowed to move into check. That's one of the rules of chess. We're also not allowed to castle if we're going to castle through check. This is the difficult one, the one that most people forget. So the king is going to go 1, 2. When it hits the red square, it's castling through check. It's not allowed to do that. Okay? We're not allowed to castle if we've moved our king. Look, the king's moved over to there. He's never going to be able to castle in either direction for the rest of the game. Even if he gets himself back to the start, he's still not allowed to castle. So make sure it's the first move that you do with your king or with your rook. In this position, the white rook decides to go up the board. It's a bit of a silly thing to do because we want to attack the center of the board to start with. And if the rook goes back, you're still not allowed to castle with that rook. Remember, we can castle in the opposite direction, and although I can't castle with this rook, I might be able to end up moving my king this square if I get these 3 pieces out of the way. I'm still allowed to castle on the queen side because I haven't moved this rook, and so far my king hasn't moved. Okay? So those are the times when you're not allowed to castle. Castling is almost always a move that we're trying to do in our games. To start with, for certain, you guys should be trying to do it in every one of your games. Because if your king's in the middle of the board, and you're going to learn this a little bit later this term, it's in a terrible, terrible position. Whereas when it's nicely castled, when it's sitting behind this barrier of pawns, it's much, much more difficult to get at. And that's what we really want. We want to make sure that our king is nice and safe. Okay, castling. Are there any questions that any of you guys have about castling before I quickly talk about one other thing before we go? So does anybody have any questions about castling? So it definitely is a legal move. There are a lot of rules involved in castling, but if you keep trying to castle and play it in all of your games, it's pretty easy to remember all of the rules. Wow, I must have explained that really well because there are no questions, so that's very good. Okay, one of the things we're trying to do is keep our king safe. Oh, why is castling a special move? That's a great question. When we castle, we break the rules. Okay? Okay, I've got a couple of questions. That's excellent. Why is castling a special move? Castling is special because we break the rules when we're making the move. The king, remember, is only allowed to move 1 square. But when we castle, it moves 2 squares. And the only piece that can jump is a knight. But when we castle, a rook jumps. And it's the only time in a game you can move 2 pieces at the same time. So, in that respect, it's special. It's a special move. I agree with you, Lynn. When you've been playing chess for a while, it doesn't feel very special because you do it every game. However, it is a special move. It's a move that we're allowed to do that breaks some of the rules. That's an excellent question. Can you castle with any other piece? No, it has to be between the king and the rook. And you can only do it when there's a gap, a clear gap between your king and your rook. If there was a piece there or there, you would not be able to do it. White can't castle in this direction because there are pieces in the way. It has to be between a king and a rook. And these are the pieces you swap over, and whenever you do it, you move your king 2 squares and your rook jumps over right next to it. Again, that's a great question. Can you move a pawn when you castle? Yes, you can move pawns before or after you castle, not during the move. The move is just between a king and a rook. Obviously, when we're in this position and our pawns are right in front of our king, we have an excellent barrier, but if later on you want to move these pawns, you're certainly allowed to. Okay? Certainly you're allowed to do that. There's nothing to stop you from moving any piece you want. The only pawn that couldn't move at the present moment would be this one. Whoops. Because if you move that one, the bishop would be aiming straight at your king. And that's not allowed. We're not allowed to be in check or make a move which leaves our king in check. Thank you very much. They're excellent questions. And if you have any other questions that you'd like to ask, then please do so. If you think of something after the lesson's finished at some stage and you think, oh, I wish I'd asked that question, you can always email. And we'd love to answer all of your questions and get everything completely straight. One last thing I want to show you. We've got about 2 minutes, so I'm going to have to be quick with this. Sometimes it's good for you guys to go and do your own thing. Get some resources that you can help with. We obviously want to make sure our king's safe, but the other side is we want to try and checkmate our opponent's king. Practicing checkmates, it's one of the best things you can do. Checkmates, I want to show you this site. It's not a site that Chess Kids has developed. This is a different site, but it's a fantastic site to use. It's called ideachess.com. ideachess.com. And it's got one absolutely amazing feature on it, where it says checkmate, and you don't even have to log into this. You can do, but I'm going to do this without logging in. I just click on checkmate, and hopefully, quite quickly, hopefully their site's not going through maintenance at the present moment, some checkmate puzzles come up. There you go. Oh, wow. Taking a little bit of time. You have 4 different sets of puzzles. 1-move puzzles, checkmate in 1, 2-move puzzles, 3-move puzzles, or 4-move puzzles. Let's do a 1-move puzzle. Okay, a 1-move puzzle. So it'll be loading a new problem. It seems to be running a little bit slowly at the moment. It's black to checkmate in 1 move. Okay, so I'm looking at the board. I'm thinking, oh, my queen, that's the best piece. Wow, it's even showing me which directions it might be going in. Hey, look, maybe I could go all the way to the top and checkmate. Wrong. Okay. Let's retry that. Maybe instead of going straight to the top, or maybe I could go diagonally up to the top. Correct. Okay? And then, if I want to, I can do more puzzles. Doing lots and lots of 1-move puzzles will help you to improve your accuracy. So, you get a chance to find the very best move. We're white in this position. Look at this king here. What can check? The knight can't check this pawn. The bishop. That's in a black square, and it must be this pawn. Is it going to be checkmate with a pawn? Correct. Excellent. 1-move puzzles, you could do hundreds and hundreds of these, and you would learn not only accuracy, but you'd also see lots and lots of patterns. Look at the way that these rooks are stopping the king from moving in either direction. Wow, this king's trapped, so I've only got to check it. Knight to here, that would be a check. Oh, I think I'd get taken if that happened. Bishop to there. Oh no, the queen could take me. I'd win the queen, but I need to checkmate. Pawn up. No, this pawn would take me. What about the bishop going in the other direction? Correct. Okay, so I'm learning about a different pattern. This king is stuck between two of my rooks. Maybe I could use my rooks in that way later on when I'm playing some games. Two-move puzzles are a lot harder, but they're actually the best ones to get going, because two-move puzzles, you are thinking about your move, then your opponent's best move, and then you've got to think of your checkmate move. So once you've done lots of the one-move puzzles and you've worked out a load of different checkmates, then you can have a go at doing some of the two-move puzzles. So you've got to think, if I go my bishop over to there, he's got a block. Yeah, I'll do this. He blocks, and then I'm going to go there, and that should be checkmate. Correct. Okay, this is an amazing resource. It's called ideachess.com. We'll go back to the front page. And if you want to become a checkmate champion, then just click on the checkmates. That should take you to this page and do loads and loads of one-move puzzles until you get so good at them they're too easy. And then do some two-move puzzles until they get easy. And then maybe you could even have a go at some of the 3- and 4-move puzzles. They're very, very difficult. Today's talk was about king safety, making sure that your king stays safe by doing our castling move. Remember, when we're castling, the king has to move 2 squares in any direction. So that might be, if the king was on its starting square, which it must be on, the king landing in this square or this square. You can't castle if you're in check. You can't castle if you're going to land in check. You can't castle if you're going through check. You can't castle if you've moved your king or your rook. So please make sure that you're castling in as many games as you can possibly castle in. Okay? And you can castle at any time during the game if you haven't, or if any of those things are just not a problem for you. So if you've not done those things, if you're not going to land in check, if you haven't moved your king, if you haven't moved your rook, if you're not in check, or if you're not going to go through check, you're allowed to castle at any time during the game. But it really is a lot better to castle as soon as possible. And go and find ideachess.com and try and get a load of checkmates done so you can checkmate your opponent when they don't put their king in a nice safe place. Look, thank you all very, very much for interacting today. There were some great questions. Hopefully, we're really beginning to get somewhere now. That's the end of this session. It will be up online a little bit later this week. Thank you all very, very much for helping and participating, and I'll talk to you again next Monday. Thank you.